Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 2 review as well as my Game Week 3 transfer plans. This was a pretty poor week, a red arrow. First time I think I'm starting the season around this sort of territory, which is of course new and something that I have to navigate, of course. But looking at it, of course, it's been tough to sort of see myself with the midfield, particularly. I think everyone is dealing with the same issue and the same conundrum. I would say this is a time to practice patience, ultimately. We looked at these fixtures and we said that the Arsenal mid and the United midfielders made the most sense. I think United are playing terrible football and Arsenal actually are still playing relatively good, although not creating nearly as much as we would expect for a team of their quality and given what they showed us last season. And Mbumo carrying the midfield, which was something I think we didn't expect in terms of, for example, the budget allocation. But of course, we did expect Mbumo to be the best 6.5 mid. So it's nice to see him perform well. Up top, very dismaying with Haaland and João Pedro. Pedro coming off the bench was quite a shock, but we also have to monitor the situation with Enciso's knock because that could actually give access to João Pedro for more minutes as we look into game weeks 3, for example. So defensively, Estupiñán continues to be great, but because everyone owns him, it doesn't really feel fantastic. And then, of course, I've been more than fortunate by owning Saliba, who practically, I would say, carried the back half of my game week here, given that Havertz and Saka continue to disappoint. So 50 points, around 1.3 million in the world. So the 2 bonus points haven't been added. But look, we are close to a lot of other managers in amongst, let's say, the 400k to 1.2 million or 1.3 million territory. But it was a very disappointing week, particularly since I actually decided to go Havertz over Odegaard, saving money in the bank. And that hasn't worked out well at all. That's been a -9 effectively from what Odegaard would have given me in this week. And I suppose it's my fault, but I also don't think I could openly and honestly say that I think Odegaard was going to be on penalties. And that would have been, for example, the difference between him and Havertz really so far, barring Havertz's yellow card last week or this week too. So looking at the team now, I've got to be honest and say that I've already gone for certain moves for the next week. So if you actually have a look at my team here, I've already gone for a move towards Gusto. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I actually wanted to keep my options quite open. I think Gusto will definitely play the next 2 fixtures for game weeks 3 and 4 for Chelsea. I think he is rather nailed. And when we look at the team, of course, Havertz sticks out like a sore thumb, but so does João Pedro as well, just because of the recent benching. However, if Enciso is out, it doesn't really mean that João Pedro needs a transfer. On top of that, with Havertz getting another 96 minutes for Arsenal and getting into decent positions, but not actually taking any good goal-scoring opportunities, because maybe you could argue Nketiah is also occupying the very similar positions, given that he's playing as the 9 right now. But Havertz sort of playing the last 15 to 20 minutes of each game so far as the 9 has been interesting. I would still say that I think Havertz is a keep. The midfield landscape is as such. You've got Foden and Sterling who are interesting picks to go around. Maddison, of course, is someone who actually did, shine bright in game week 1. But of course, we know that there's some sort of injury situation and concern with him. So it's very unlikely that he'll actually be ready to play for game week 3, in my honest opinion, just reading based on what the journalists have said so far and the fact that we don't have a diagnosis for Maddison. Now, of course, we can wait for press conferences and then react to that. But it's still a situation that I probably don't really want to deal with. And on top of that, I think Havertz versus Fulham, with a Tim Ream less Fulham and a Palhinha less Fulham, is still quite interesting to me. There's still an opportunity, in my opinion, to say, let's say, Havertz could still start at the 9. But if Jesus is, let's say, back, then I think, the plans are all over. Havertz is actually about to fall tonight, and I have no interest really in keeping Havertz whatsoever. But the reality is the fixture is too good. And I'm looking at this and saying, I think a lot of people will criticize me for going for Havertz, and I can understand that, but players like Rashford and Bruno have disappointed as well. Rashford, particularly in terms of the underlying stats, because he hasn't done much in this sort of central forward position. And then with Fernandes, of course, he's done incredible. In fact, he probably could have gotten a penalty in the previous match, and he's had really, really good underlying stats. So I think with Fernandes, it's less so easy to make the same argument. But the idea here is still see out the best fixtures that you have in FPL and then make decisions after that. So Shaw has a great match next week. Saliba has a great match next week. So do Rashford and Havertz, if we're being honest. And then Saka and Fernandes, because they've actually looked relatively good. Or Saka, I mean, to be honest, underlying stats not so good, but then did score an Argent Robin like Screamer in game week 1. I do feel like I have to keep these players for these fixtures because, yes, of course, there's a bit of upside to go from, let's say, Havertz to Sterling or to Havertz, and then to go to Foden, for example, who might have to deal with slightly less X-Mins in the future. But I think because Havertz's fixtures are so bad in game week 4, I'd much rather have 2 free transfers in game week 4. And because I've already gone for the move for Gusto to avoid a Reece James price drop there and to leave myself with much more room for flexibility, I do think Havertz has to stay in my team, and I'd much rather, as I said, the two free transfers so that I can actually adequately assess what to do with Rashford in Game Week 4 and what to do with Havertz in Game Week 4, which is probably going to be one of Foden or one of Sterling as well when the time comes. So this is sort of how I'm seeing my team. And in fact, I still see an opportunity to bench boost because if I go to the transfers right now, what I think is so interesting is I've got 2.5 million in the bank. And even if Havertz falls, I can go for Jackson still and go for a bench boost here if Enciso is out, which means that I will actually be playing a very, very strong team for Game Week 3. Other than that, I can also just go for Alvarez too. I mean, Alvarez is a little bit more interesting in the sense that I think he's also someone who is dealing with some sort of X-Men's risk. You've got Palmer, Bernardo Silva, and now Doku are coming to the team. We've seen Alvarez play some minutes on the wing positions as well as the midfield. If, let's say, some of these positions are starting to be filled by people coming back into the team or by Doku being integrated into the team, then of course Alvarez actually feels like another sort of X-Men's risk, and that doesn't feel so good on the bench boost here. But what he does allow me as well is, let's say if I attack the fixtures, attack Sheffield United away, then I still have zero point 0.5 in the bank to let's say deal with the Havertz price drop. And maybe I can actually deal with that adequately by just going for Sterling or Foden on Game Week 4 instead, which would probably be a little bit nicer for me. I can even go for Madison if, let's say, he's actually back from injury by then. So I feel like that's a more flexible way to go about it, because rolling your transfers is important at the start of the season to get more information, and ultimately that this is what I want to do. And ultimately, because the other Arsenal midfielders, except for, let's say, Odegaard, who let's be honest, we didn't expect to be on penalties, I could of course go straight back into Odegaard, but doesn't feel right now to do so, just because I would be going for the Fulham fixture with another asset already from an Arsenal team, and then actually just moving towards Game Week 4 where you've got United, where all these assets seemingly have a much lower ceiling. So I like the idea of having two free transfers for Game Week 4, being able to address with whatever I see fit with the United team, even for example an asset like Shaw if the defense continues to look very poor for United, and then moving forwards from that point on. And we can also see what happens with João Pedro and Enciso and deal with that more adequately too, because I feel like João Pedro is arguably just as much of a problem for my team as Havertz if, let's say, Enciso is fit. And so because João Pedro has a slightly worse fixture, in my opinion, because Fulham are so dire and such a poor defense right now, I would like to see this sort of punt out with Havertz. And once again, we have to say it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Havertz, of course, has been very poor. So have so many other midfielders that we actually highly rate, and I think there's still an opportunity here with Jesus out. So I'm just going to see it out myself, and we'll see what happens in Game Week 3. But that's going to be my transfer plan so far. Of course, if any press conferences come around and we need to react to that, I will. But that's going to be how I see my Game Week 3 lining up for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.